see that with perseverance and hard work, you can achieve what you want to do. And this, we go back to this thing of loving who you are, you know, and being true to yourself. I'm not English.
Yeah.
I'll never speak English like an Englishman. I'm not French. I mean, you know, I'm not anything but Peruvian. So the more I embrace it, the more it'll benefit my work and what I do. And I think that I would advise this to all companies that are trying to make something out of what they do. Be true to yourself. And I guess my mistake at the beginning was to underestimate the knowledge or the power of other people's opinion, you know. So I was scared to share before something was finished. And I've learned with time that why not? I mean, at the end of the day, let's listen to everybody's opinion, because I am the boss, so I will make the final decision.
Right.
But I remember being in the studio and thinking one day, I'd hate the idea of doing an image that I think is great, but everybody behind me thinks it's bad. So even if the receptionist of the studio has something to say, I'll listen to it, because what does it take, you know? You will decide right or wrong.
I love that humility.
I was on the beach yesterday, and I was walking, and a gentleman came up to me and said, "Are you here for the conference, for the festival?" And I said, "Yeah, I am." And he said, "You're an advertiser?" And I said, "No, I'm a performer. I'm here to talk to a group of female CEOs because I'm a very young female CEO." And he said, "You don't look like a CEO to me. You're not what I really picture when I picture a CEO." And so I said, "Wow, then I'm really happy I get to change that." And so, you know, walking into that room last night was, felt very good.
I think it's a good point that when things started to heat up and you had momentum, you believe in pushing harder and going further.
Also, not chasing a formula. The best thing that I ever did was not try to recreate Closer 16 times on my album. I did the exact opposite. I was like, cool, I've done that, now I'm going to do something else. This is a, you know, easily digestible fan experience. It's a single on the radio. It's something you can check in, check out. You know, if you're playing a video game, it's like a quick battle. What I had to do was create a campaign play. I had to create a storyline. I had to create lore, an experience, something for people to buy into and to understand.
Honestly, I think that's the dominant and rising aesthetic of our culture right now. Chatty, personal, jokey. And we just happen to be making a product with the chatty intimacy of a podcast before podcasts existed. Like, we started on the air in 1995. So when podcasts came into being, we had a huge head start. We did not do any marketing to achieve our success on the internet. So we'll often run through 10 or 15 different story ideas, go into production on 6 or 7 of them, and then we kill everything but 2 or 3. In fact, it's not clear to me what the lineup of next week's show will be, and it won't be clear probably till Thursday or Friday when we finish the show. As we make it, we decide like what's going to be in the show. And people ask me all the time, like, how do we get the interviewees to open up so much and say such personal things on the show? And the answer is, most people we try it with, it doesn't work. It just doesn't work. There's an old saying that I think applies in this situation, which is, great stories happen to those who can tell them.
The myth of balance. We all hear about and know people that are super successful at work, loved at work, volunteer at the dog shelter, and have a blog on food. Assume you are not one of these people. In your 20s and 30s, if economic security is a priority for you, assume you are going to have work and not much else. I don't remember my 20s and 30s. I was working so hard. It cost me my hair. It cost me a lot of my relationships. And guess what? It was worth it. Apple. When you think with your genitals, you are irrational. This entire gathering is a celebration of the irrational. Brand is meant to evoke emotions that get you to do stupid things, to get you to pay $1.20 for a sugary soda that costs 7 cents, to get you to pay $75,000 for a $60,000 car because it makes you feel German and masculine and successful. We are in the business of the irrational. Apple has achieved that. People are no longer thinking with their brains when they buy Apple, and as a result, they have been able to achieve the impossible in business. They are the premium price product with margins somewhere between Ferrari and Hermes. Yet, they're the #1 share in smartphones. This is the same if a car company was able to achieve the margins of Ferrari with the production volumes of Toyota. We've never seen this before. We've never seen the premium price product be the share leader. As a result, the profits are staggering. This is an infographic done to size. This is Apple's profits relative to the remainder of the four. Apple will do more profits this quarter than Amazon has done in its entire life ×2.
I think that what we found in our research, first and foremost, was what one former employee of Cambridge Analytica, which is essentially a data firm, described to us as a tactic that they openly referred to as psychological warfare. I mean, they said PSYOPs for short, which is actually military terminology, but to describe political campaigning. And previously, a few years ago, they were working, in developing countries in elections, for example, with the president of Ghana, of Kenya, but for a hearts and minds approach. How do you change hearts and minds based on political persuasions? And they took that approach now to Western democracy in both Brexit and in the U.S. election, where they have so many more tools at their disposal. And this is where the research comes in, where they have this vast treasure trove of data, where actually, as Michal said, can come at a much lower cost. So they're basically going to the Trump campaign. They have a very clear mission based on their own priorities, based on their own political persuasions, and essentially going forth these campaigns and saying, here is the exact voters that you should target, and here is exactly how you should target them. And that's not very different from people who used to send mailers in snail mail. It's not very different from going and having TV and radio advertising buys. But the key issue is that this data is being used without that user's knowledge. So, one could make the case that the traditional census information that these campaigns have had, where they distribute a mailer, they probably know that this is a Hispanic household, they probably know this is an African American household, they know this is a well-educated household, they have a sense of the median income based on publicly collected data. They could advertise in Atlanta based on that specific style of targeting, and they'll advertise in Columbus an entirely different way. The issue at hand over here is, I guess most users know that they're signing away their privacy to some extent. They do not realize that campaigns are now accessing this profile of every like that you have registered, of every link that you have shared, in order to then create a profile that they can then target you and say, this is why you should not vote for Hillary Clinton, or this is why you should not vote for Bernie Sanders. And that's what became controversial, and that's why when they initially bragged about just how they were able to employ these psychological tactics without the voters' knowledge, they realized that they may be violating federal election laws in certain by using that information without that voters' consent.
And I think maybe what makes me different from some of the other people who do what I do is my appetite for risk is certainly one thing. Most people, when they get to my age, are fairly risk averse. Celebrities, brands, networks are all fairly risk averse. When you get to giant productions like this, where careers are on the line, jobs are on the line, people naturally go from being risk wide to very, very narrow. Their job is on the line. Their boss has, dropped a few million, or in some cases hundreds of millions of dollars into productions. They've got to make sure that they pull it off or they get fired. I tend to take the role of human grenade. And by that, I mean I will drop myself into conversations, into planning meetings, into calls, into creative concepts and be deliberately disruptive, or challenging, or bold, or foolish. And I can do that because I'm surrounded by a number of people who are careful with me and know that I have a tendency to get overexcited like a dog. But that kind of yin and yang, that tension between me saying stuff that I think, well, come on, we can go for this, let's do this, let's shoot for the moon, and the people around me going, look, you can't do that on live, whatever. That creates ideas, it creates and sparks conversation,